Guys, I'm going to hold one more minute just so that we don't have to repeat anything. So we're going to hold one more minute and then we'll get going. All righty. Good afternoon, everyone. Don't you all look spectacular? All right, so let's dive into this. And so here's how this will go. There's really nothing but good news to kind of share with you on this call today. And from looking at the names on the screen, is there anyone other than Paul who has a loan that was more than $50,000? Just kind of raise your hand or, okay. So the good news is if your loans are under $50,000, one of the things that has come our way since we were initially doing this back in April and May, and then doing it all over again back in whenever we were doing it, back in July and August, right before the deadlines. Everything seemed relatively unclear back then, and since then there have been some clarifying events that really make very easy sense for you to ask for forgiveness. And there's no real reason that I can see that each of you wouldn't have your loans forgiven. So the idea that if you have a loan under $50,000, you can use a form called the, what is it called? It's called the 350. Hold on a second, I have it here someplace.
3508S, Rick.
Yes, it's the short form. Thank you very much, Mary. I appreciate that. And so that short form gives you the opportunity, there we go, the 3508S, gives you the opportunity to literally just fill out a short single form. For many of these short forms, they're not, depending on the bank, they're not even asking you for any kind of backup, like the copies of the checks or your copies of your bank statement that shows the transfers. It's kind of like they're asking you to sign your name to the fact that you utilized the money for payroll purposes, which ultimately each of you did because you paid yourselves with it, right? And that was how most of you applied. I guess that's the other question I should ask. Again, besides Paul, is there anybody on the call who applied for PPP money as an employer with an employee that you pay through payroll? Or did you all apply using your Schedule C as self-employed owner income? Okay, that's what I figured, just based on who I'm seeing is on the call. So the good news is that, again, all of that seems to be relatively simple. If you remember in the beginning, when we were talking after each of you were getting your loans, we kind of laid out a plan, because when that was happening, we were still stuck in an 8-week period of time. And so that 8 weeks wasn't going to allow you to use up all the money that you received. The good news is that at some point after that, our last conversations, they passed the PPPFA, the Payroll Protection Program Flexibility Act, which then allowed for employers, including self-employed persons, to utilize a 24-week period. And so that 24-week period is either 24 weeks from the date you received your money, or December 31st of this year, whichever comes first, right? So, so most of you are in the situation where once we got word then that you could use the 24-week period and ask for full forgiveness up to 20,833, right? Now 20,833 will sound familiar to many of you because any of you who had a Schedule C over $100,000, that's the loan amount that you got. You got 20,833 or some version of that. Some banks rounded it to 20,800, right? For those of you whose Schedule C was under $100,000, you got a version of slightly less than the 20,833. But again, nobody on this call, again, save Paul, should have a loan more than $20,833. Because if you do, the rules could be a little bit different for you. So that's why I keep asking the question. So the good news is, if you received a loan of up to $20,833, it appears very clear to us now that based on what the government has come back to the banks and the banks to each of us and said is, you just have to fill out a simple form and provide any additional documentation that your bank asks you for, and we're going to get to some of that in a second, and submit that. And they have about 60 days to come back to you and say, yes, this all looks good. We think it makes good sense on the bank level. And then they pass it off to the SBA. The SBA has another 90 days or up to another 90 days to reply to the bank with full forgiveness. So even if you do this week, it could well be April before you hear anything. I don't really think that's the case. I know a couple of our agents have applied and have already heard that they are approved. So the good news is, at least in some instances, it seems like we're getting faster answers and faster approvals than the 60 days plus 90 days that the documentation seems to indicate. So what does all that mean? All that means, I'm sorry, let me finish my train of thought there. So if you remember, a number of weeks ago, I encouraged each of you to go and deliver to yourselves the money that you were holding, right? Because we had kind of divided everything up, and you paid yourself 8 weeks, and there was going to be this extra just in case they didn't change the rules. They did change the rules, and so now that extra, as part of a 24-week program, anything up to 20,833 will be forgiven. So if you haven't already cleared your PPP account and moved that money to your business account or your personal account, however you were paying yourself, go ahead and get that done in case your bank asks for a bank statement that has a zero balance. Some are, some are not. The next thing you need to do, if you haven't done it already, is connect with your lender. Because here's the tricky part about today. The tricky part about today is that there's 24 of us on the call. There's probably 15 or 16 different lenders represented by those 24 people, right? And each lender has a slightly different path to have you apply for forgiveness. The good news is that many of them are simplifying things by asking you to go to an online portal. Those of you who used Cabbage, I have been through the Cabbage process. Those of you who have used Fairfield County Bank, I have been through the Fairfield County Bank process. Those are the two that I've personally done, one for myself and one with one of you, just to kind of get myself acquainted with their online portals. The online portals seem relatively simple to use and very straightforward. I will give you, by putting up the short form on the screen in a second, I'll give you the information that you'll need to gather before you get started, just in case you don't have some or all of it. There are a couple of banks that I've come across that have not gone online with this and have asked for documents to be filled out. A number of them have just asked for the SBA document to be filled out and returned. And again, I'm going to show you that form in a second. So that seems relatively simple. Some other ones are asking for the SBA form and another form or two that is bank generated. So again, I can't tell you specifically or exactly for each of you what you'll need, because it's driven by the lender that provided you the loan. But if you have not connected with that lender, please make that your first step to find out exactly what they are looking for from you. Something odd that came up in the last 2 weeks as I asked you guys to send me the stuff you had from your banks was that there are some banks, Chase is one of them so far, and People's is the other. Those two banks are specifically asking that you wait until after the first of the year to apply for forgiveness. I don't know the reason for that. They may just be trying to kind of buffer themselves while they're short-staffed at holiday time, or I'm not exactly sure why that is. But if you got money from Chase or you got money from People's, again, their instructions based on what I'm reading say, please wait until after the first of the year, and after the first of the year, you can jump on and apply for forgiveness. So know that because each of the banks is a little different, you may not have the opportunity to jump and do it today. Unless you have been told by your bank that you need to wait until after the first of the year, I would encourage you to just get it done. The Congress is working hard, at least so we're told, on some kind of additional stimulus package. I don't know if they're actually going to ever get their you-know-what together to get that done. And yet another round of PPP is expected to come with that. I was asked this morning, and I'll just address this really quickly now. It is my understanding, because I am a Washington insider, it is my understanding that any new PPP rules are going to come with some stricter eligibility requirements than what happened the last time, which means, from the things that I'm hearing, that there'll be some kind of proof you need to provide that your income is actually off by X percent year over year due to, last time it was like, boom, everybody just go. And so everybody just went. Our industry didn't necessarily see a slowdown, and yet we were all still eligible. I'm not sure that's going to be the case this next time. However, just in case there's additional opportunity as business owners, I would encourage each of you to apply for forgiveness and put a period on the end of this first one while you can right now, before anything new comes out, just so that it's not, I'm fearful that one of the requirements might be, and you've already kind of used up and exhausted and taken care of your first one before you're eligible for the second one. So I just don't want that to create a problem for you if in fact you end up being eligible for something additional. Plus, I just think that the paperwork and the tracking of it all is simpler if you get one done before you move into a potential second one. So having said all of that, that's kind of the data dump that I have for you about where we are with PPP. Let's talk now about the forgiveness process. The forgiveness process, as I said, will be very simple for most of you. And if you take a look, I just put the short form on the screen. Many of you have already received this short form, and many of you have, some of you have started to complete it. The short form can be utilized if, in fact, as you see at the top, you received a PPP loan of less than $50,000, and together with all your affiliates, all of your corporate subsidiaries and everything else, every place else that your name appears, you did not receive PPP loans totaling $2 million or more. Does anybody fit that category? Okay. So what that means is that all of us on this call, again, with the exception of Paul, because I know his loan is over 50K and has specifics in terms of employees with payroll, cannot use this form. However, if for the rest of us, this form is kind of it. Some of you may fill out this form online in a portal. Some of you may fill it out by printing it out and actually filling it out and signing it and returning it to your bank. Others of you may utilize a portal that your bank points you to that asks for answers to questions that then goes and auto-populates this form. That's what mine did on Fairfield County Bank, right? It asked me a bunch of questions, and when I gave them that information, it took that info and auto-populated this form and only asked me to initial and sign it. So those are kind of the ways that you may see this show up in your process. So at the top, you can see this form looks almost identical to the form that you used to apply if you actually used an SBA form to apply for the loan, where at the top you need your legal business name and address, any DBAs, your social security number, and your contact info. So simple stuff at the top. Remember, your legal business name as self-employed persons is just your name, right? So that's just you and your home address. Some people were utilizing Keller Williams Realty and the office address. That is not what you would put here, because it's not what you used when you applied for the loan, right? Just to be clear. And then this information here in this next section is information you may have to go and gather before you start this process. For example, most of you know your loan amount. However, do you know the SBA PPP loan number, right? The SBA applied a loan number to your loan. That is different than the lender's loan number. You see how there's SBA loan number and lender loan number. So what you may need to do is you may need to go back and ask your bank for that information before you can get started, if you don't already know it. You should have had to sign loan documents when you got the loan. However, my loan documents didn't have any loan numbers on them. They were just the documents. So the loan numbers were assigned after I signed. I had to go to the bank and say, can you give me that information so that I can go apply for forgiveness? They said yes and sent it to me. So those two things are important pieces of information, as well as your loan disbursement date. And what I have found is that as I was going through a bunch of mine, the loan disbursement date and the day it actually showed up in my account were 3 out of the 4 that I did were different. So ask the lender for the loan disbursement date, because that needs to line up when you apply for forgiveness, because the loan disbursement date is the first day of your either 8-week or 24-week covered period. P.S. There's nobody on this call, in my mind, that shouldn't use the 24-week period, because again, that's how you get to utilize the maximum amount. So wherever it asks, it won't ask you on the short form to choose a period. However, if in the portal, any place that you may be applying for forgiveness in, asks you to choose a period, choose the 24-week period. Most of you received your loans sometime in either May, June, July, some of you as late as August, right? 24 weeks from anything past July or so is the end of the year anyway. So there's no reason not to just utilize the 24. The third line here, employees at time of loan application and employees at time of loan forgiveness application, that's for you in your scenario, that's 1 and 1, right? Because you're applying as solo practitioners, independent contractors, self-employed persons, whatever you want to call it. So it was you in the beginning, it's you today, right? So 1 and 1. And then this next line is for the EIDL advance. A number of you, when we were applying for PPP way back in the very early part of the CARES Act, did apply for what was touted as an economic injury disaster loan, right? Which was put forth as, we'll give you up to $10,000 as a freebie. You don't have to pay it back. Most people who applied for that got $1,000 because they changed it right after the fact to be only $1,000 per employee. And so if you were a self-employed person, you then counted as one person. So if you got any money from EIDL, you would have to put that in there as well as your EIDL application number. And the reason for that is you can't double dip. If you got $1,000 from EIDL and you got $20,833 from the PPP, you're not eligible for $21,833 in forgiveness, right? That $1,000 extra is going to be extra, and that will have to be repaid. because they're going to subtract any EIDL money from your PPP loan to calculate your forgiveness. Now, what's interesting is that when I look through the names on the call, I think many of you do not have the EIDL in addition to the PPP, right? Most of you just have the PPP. However, if there's anybody who has that $1,000 that came from EIDL that just showed up as a grant, you do have to report that, and it will be subtracted from your PPP money in terms of what you'll be eligible to be forgiven. And then, of course, the fifth line here says forgiveness amount. And so again, for most of you, unless you have an EIDL advance to subtract from it, your loan amount will be your forgiveness amount, whatever amount that was. All right, any questions so far on what I have gone through? I'm going to close this, then I'm going to bring it back in a second to go through some of the representations you'll make. Go ahead, Mary. You're muted.
Sorry.
No worries.
I was trying to start this in the portal for Cabbage, and it asked me what my payroll schedule was, and I stopped there.
Yeah, so what we did in Cabbage, when it asked for payroll schedule, I think the fifth button down was other, right? And so what we did is we chose other, and then it opens up a little box.
Yes.
And we wrote in flexible independent contractor.
Okay.
Right, because that is really your payroll schedule is flexible because you're an independent contractor. And so we thought that was the clearest way to communicate that there isn't a set schedule, because that I think also offers the opportunity because most of you were on a schedule and then you stopped. And then a couple of weeks ago, you made one last payment, right? And so I think that when you classify it as other and flexible because you're an independent contractor, it also tends to explain why we did 8 weeks of this and then kind of one lump sum at the end. Again, frankly, I don't think anyone's really going to care about that based on everything I've seen. And yet in Cabbage, when it does ask that, that's how we address that. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you, Rick.
You're welcome. And again, for any of the rest of you who may not be actually with Cabbage, but in a portal, you may be asked some of those questions. I'll go on record now saying that if you get into your portal and you get stuck, before you do it incorrectly, stop. I am more than happy to jump on a Zoom with you for 20 minutes and walk through the portal with you so that we're making decisions together, so that you don't have it kicked back at you. So if you want to stop midway and say, you know what, okay, save what I have, but don't submit, I'm happy to set that up with you either over the weekend or next week. So just text me and we'll figure something out. Diana is asking in the chat, does anyone have a loan with Savings Bank of Danbury? I have not seen anything from Savings Bank of Danbury yet. Marvin does have Savings Bank of Danbury. So, and for you guys, it might, if we batch everybody, like if somebody's struggling with Cabbage, what I might say is, okay, so if Lori's struggling with Cabbage and she's okay with putting out to the Market Center, look, we're doing a Cabbage live online on, Sunday at noon, we'll just kind of walk through Lori's together and then people can watch. So anybody who needs help, I will ask you if you're okay if we put that out there just in case somebody else needs the help as well. Any other questions before I move through the rest of the form?
My bank is Webster Bank.
Yeah.
And I haven't checked, but she told me she's gonna send a link that I have to go through with Webster Bank to fill out everything. I haven't looked through everything yet because the person who I got the loan from left the company, so somebody else is kind of trying to help me out there.
Got it. Yeah, so the good news is it sounds like there's a portal. It's simpler when there's just an online portal because it's hard to screw it up. You can't move forward in the portal unless you answer a certain set of questions. So that sounds like good news, Debbie. And as soon as you get that, again, gather the data and then start to and get that in as quickly as you can. All right, I'm going to put the the form back on the screen just to kind of walk you through what the rest of this says, because even those of you who are on a portal, you will have to initial on the portal and then either sign or type sign the bottom of this document, which basically says, I'm not a criminal, I used it properly, I'm not trying to defraud the government. That's what all this says. And so here are the representations you will make as you go through this, that the dollar amount for which you're requesting forgiveness does not exceed the principal amount of the loan. Again, most of you are $20,833 or less. Just make sure that your loan amount, your forgiveness amount, is not larger than your loan amount. It also says that payroll costs are equal to at least 60% of the forgiveness amount. The good news is, with the 24-week period being offered to us, no one has to go through the struggle of finding additional ways to spend the money, because you used it 100% on payroll, because you paid yourself over time with those funds, right? And everything I've read and the people I've spoken to at 2 or 3 different banks have also come back to me and said, if you can submit things as 100% payroll because that's what you used it for, it makes the forgiveness process so much simpler. Nobody has to do any math. Nobody has to check that your business lease or your business rent or whatever, what was in place prior to February 15th, you have to upload a whole lot less. And so the good news for us is, for most of you on this call, it's just 100% payroll. So you automatically meet the requirement of 60% or better because it was all used for payroll. And then of course, the 24-week period was chosen, that the loan amount, the forgiveness amount does not exceed the $20,833, which we already talked about. The second line, I understand if the funds were used for unauthorized purposes, they're going to come and throw me in jail. Number 3, the borrower has verified payments for the eligible payroll based on what has been asked of them, right? And so what that might mean is, again, in a portal or the way your bank asks you to prove stuff, you may have to upload or submit with this document copies of the bank account that the money went to, and then showing that the money was used out of that account down to a 0 balance. You may, if you did that by check, you may have to put copies of those checks in with that. Again, for those of you who did use a payroll company, which I know is almost none of you, payroll companies do have to supply the payroll details, right? And your payroll company should be able to get you where you can go into their portal and print them out for each payroll that you're utilizing to justify the amount, as well as 941s. 941s are tax forms that your payroll company produces for you quarterly. So generally speaking, this whole experience covered 2 or maybe 3 quarters, depending on 2 or maybe 3 quarters, depending on when you got your loan. So you would just go and print out or ask your payroll company for the 941s to cover each of the quarters that you're applying for forgiveness for, and the payroll detail page that showed the payroll coming out for each of the weeks or every other week, depending on how your payroll worked for those funds. And I tell you that the money doesn't work out to be exact, right? For those of you who have payroll, you start on a certain day. Some of you have to prorate some of that, and some of you will start on one day and it'll just run, and your money will run out halfway through a payroll period. That's okay, right? You just print that detail out and then write on what I did is I wrote on the bottom, whole period equals X, prorated for remainder of PPP funds equals Y. Right, so it's just so everyone can look and see, yes, money was used until it ran out. Good for everyone. Go with God. Let's be done. Line number 4, you're confirming that anything other than payroll you've submitted documentation for. Again, most of you, it's 100% payroll, so you won't have anything additional on that. The next line, information is true and correct. And again, you're saying that if you make a false statement or don't send what they ask or are trying to lie or cheat or steal, you're going to jail and they're going to fine you and lots of bad things will happen to you. And then the last couple of lines here, the tax docs are not forged, that they're actually your tax docs. If in fact you're asked for additional tax documents, I think they're also asking you to reconfirm that the tax documents you use to apply for the loan are not fraudulent, right? That they're actual submitted documents to the IRS. And then lastly, you understand that the SBA, even if the bank says you're clear and sends it off to the SBA may ask for additional information. It's very unlikely based on the fact that you're using this short form and your loans are under 50K, but they do reserve that right. Then you sign that at the bottom and all is right with the world, right? So that's the document that most of you will use. Again, some of you may see it online. Some of it may show up a little bit differently because you have a portal online. But in one way, shape, or form, that document or a version of it will get filled out. You'll do all your initials. You'll sign the bottom. Any additional documentation that the bank asks for, you'll attach, and you'll either upload it into your portal or send that off to your bank for forgiveness. Don't make it hard, because the under 50,000 loans are really quite simple to process. I haven't seen any bank yet be complicated about it. Debbie's question in the chat box, right now you've got to just you got to pay yourself through the rest of the money, so that there's a zero balance in all of that. So if there's extra money, you got to pay that through to yourself so that you can go ahead and apply for the forgiveness. What other questions do you have?
I have one question.
Yes, Silva.
When I started with Cabbage, for some odd reason, they have 60 Longridge Road as the company address. And I'm 100% sure that I entered my personal address. And there was a warning that if I decide to change the address, this may actually invalidate my entry. And I copied you on this in an email because apparently this seems to be something that I don't know how to overcome.
I wouldn't overcome it. I would just leave it at 60 Longridge because it doesn't matter. It's not relevant. It's not relevant information. You know, again, a lot of this is just boxes for people to check. The important stuff is that you use the money properly and that you're willing to state that you use the money properly. I would leave that one alone. Let them come back to you and say, you don't work at 60 Longridge anymore. Let them come and ask you the question, and then you can actually have a conversation and explain it. I wouldn't pursue it any longer. What else? What other questions do you have, if any? It seems pretty simple, right? I will tell you that I had 4 of them. I did the first 2. My first 2 were the under 50K ones, and they were a breeze. I don't even think I was asked to. Well, I was asked to upload any documentation that would help, but none of it was required. When I went through it with one of your colleagues on Cabbage last week or earlier this week, he wasn't even asked to upload anything. No supporting documentation. He just had to make representations, talk about the numbers and the money, and then push go. And as far as I know, no one's come back to him to say, we need to see this, this, and this. So I think what you're going to find is that it's going to be actually quite simple for you to apply for this forgiveness. And again, as I said, I do know that some people in the offices have already received their thumbs up that the money is either forgiven or being passed to the SBA for that forgiveness process. So I think what you'll find is all the confusion around it. They tried real hard, especially for 50,000 and under, to remove as much of the craziness. Because I will tell you, I can remember having a conversation with Paul early on that we thought we had to go and get accounting degrees before we could actually fill out any of these forms. And the good news is even the over 50K ones, there's still an EZ form because neither one of us got more than $2 million. Like, what a joke, right? Neither one of us got more than $2 million. So the EZ form is a little bit more complicated than the short form, but it's not the whole big, long, you need to know more about physics and astrophysics than anything else to figure it out. So, so Marvin is asking, the SBA form states 60%, minimum of 60% of payroll. It's a minimum of 60%. So again, most of you used it as 100% payroll, so you meet that standard.
I have one more question.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. It probably doesn't matter. I found out that Cabbage was acquisite, or whatever the word is, by American Express. It doesn't matter, right? You didn't come across any hurdle related to this.
We did not. I did the Cabbage one on either Tuesday or Wednesday of this week, and there were no issues. So I think whoever the, frankly, I think if they were acquired by American Express, I would look at that as only a good thing, right? Because now instead of some smaller independent company, you have a company that's now backed by one of the largest companies on the planet. So I think that's probably a good thing. And I think it's not quite as relevant. It's not relevant to the forgiveness process. Paul.
I didn't have my hand up. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Sorry, you unmuted. So I thought that was the same as the hand. Anybody else have any questions?
Rick?
Yes.
Yeah, on the form from Savings Bank Danbury, it says the smallest of, first of all, it says line 1 payroll cost, right? So that would be $20,833, correct?
Yes, sir.
But down below, it says potential forgiveness amounts. It says the PPP loan amount or payroll cost 60% requirement, divide line 1 by 60%. That means the payroll divided by 60%. That's what I'm confused with. And then it says your forgiveness amount is the smallest of lines 5, 6, and 7.
Yeah. So do me a favor. Can you send me those forms? I'll be happy to look at them. It's tough for me to answer that without actually seeing them.
Sure.
So if you send them to me, I'll take a look and get you an answer back. Do know, however, that the reality is you can utilize up to 100% of the funds for payroll. That is completely legit. And so either we have to go back to Savings Bank of Danbury and say, okay, your forms don't make sense, or let me take a look and maybe I'll see something that you're not seeing there. So sure, shoot them to me and I'll be happy to look at them.
Marvin, I got a question for you. Is that the June 16th form?
Yeah, at the very bottom, it should give you a date. Good point, Paul.
Or sometimes right at the top?
Yeah, because what you want is form 3508S revised as of 10/20. Marvin, you're muted if you're telling us.
Yeah, this one is 35, shit, where'd it go? 3508 EZ 620. So yeah, it seems like I might have the wrong form.
Yeah, so that's the EZ form, not the S form. So you want the S form, not EZ, because S is different than EZ. And you want the one, thank you for mentioning that, Paul, because as you guys are getting forms, make sure that you have the one that's revised as of 10/20. And you want 3508S as in short. It's the short form, not the EZ form. EZ form is for loans over 50K. What else? Anything else? Going once? You're welcome. So as we end, let me just say this. As I said, I think this will be simpler than we thought. So that's the good news. However, don't guess. If you're stuck on something, just let me know and I will be happy to jump on a Zoom and have you share your screen. We can do it together. If you want to just start together and go through the process together, I'm happy to do that. Just let me know. I'm around all weekend, so if you want to use some of that time this weekend, that's probably simpler for me than if we wait until next week. If it's next week, it'll probably be late in the day into the early evening before I can jump on those Zooms, just based on my schedule. But I'm happy to do that this weekend for anybody who needs assistance. Or if you want to send me what you're seeing, if it doesn't make sense, I'm happy to put my eyes on it and then give you a call and we can talk through it. So whatever you need, just let me know. And I will also send the link to this out late today, in case going back and listening to this again would be helpful. All righty? All right, guys. Thanks for being on. I hope this was helpful. We'll see you soon.
Hi, Rick.
Thank you.
Sure thing. Let me know how I can help.